What happens when royal privilege meets television reality? In just 12 seconds, one heated comment would transform a friendly chat show appearance into the most shocking celebrity meltdown ever caught on camera. Last night, behind the glittering lights of the Graham Norton Show, viewers witnessed an explosive confrontation that nobody saw coming. This is the exclusive inside story of how Prince Harry went from charming guest to entitled antagonist, leaving the beloved host with no choice but to do the unthinkable. The evening had begun exactly the way millions of viewers had come to expect. Graham Norton, the man whose easy charm and quick wit had defined Friday night entertainment for over 20 years, was in his usual form. The studio buzzed with excitement as the crew made final adjustments. The red sofa gleamed under the lights, and the crowd whispered with anticipation. They had no idea they were about to witness a moment that would go down in television history. Graham welcomed the audience with a warm smile, delivering his opening monologue with the perfect blend of humor and energy that made even the dullest nights feel special. His first two guests, Hollywood star Sarah Matthews and comedian James Walsh, settled comfortably onto the sofa, exchanging jokes and stories as cameras rolled. Everything felt smooth, natural, and unmistakably Graham Norton. Then the stage manager signaled for the third guest, Prince Harry. The audience erupted in applause as he entered, wearing a navy suit that gave him the polished look of a confident public figure. But the moment Graham extended his hand for a friendly greeting, something felt off. Harry's handshake was quick, almost dismissive, and his response carried a strange edge. "Just Harry is fine," he said, not with humility, but irritation. Graham recovered with a polite laugh, but the atmosphere shifted. Harry paused at the sofa, staring at the seating arrangement with visible annoyance. "I was told I'd have the end seat." Sarah Matthews immediately slid aside to accommodate him, but Harry's tone had already pulled the room tensely inward. When he settled into the seat, he looked around with open dissatisfaction. "This lighting is harsh. I asked for softer lighting." Graham attempted humor, but Harry didn't acknowledge it. Instead, he continued adjusting himself dramatically on the sofa, muttering about expectations and consideration for his position. The other guests exchanged uneasy looks. The audience felt quieter than usual. The tension was so thick it felt like part of the set. And Graham, still smiling, still trying, didn't know that this was just the beginning. Because in only a few minutes, Harry would say something that crossed a line so deeply that even Graham Norton, the kindest host on British television, couldn't ignore it. For a long, heavy second, the studio went completely silent. Not the ordinary silence of a quiet audience, but the suffocating kind that swallows an entire room when someone crosses a line so boldly that nobody knows how to react. Graham Norton, the man known for diffusing chaos with a joke and smoothing tension with a smile, didn't smile this time. His eyes locked onto Harry, and for the first time all night, Graham looked genuinely tired. "Someone of your caliber," Graham repeated, his tone calm, but with an unmistakable edge of disbelief. Harry didn't notice or didn't care. "You're treating me like some random guest," he continued. "No special arrangements, no acknowledgement of protocol. Your staff barely looked at me when I arrived." Graham sat back slightly, his voice losing its familiar warmth. "Harry, you're a guest on this show. Like everyone else. Exactly like everyone else." Something snapped inside Harry. He leaned forward aggressively, his voice rising. "I think you're forgetting who you're talking to. I'm not a reality TV contestant desperate for airtime." Sarah Matthews audibly gasped. James Walsh quickly looked down at his shoes as if hoping to disappear into them. Even the audience, usually quick to laugh, remained frozen, hands still, breaths held. Graham exhaled slowly. "No, you're right. You're not a reality star." His tone sharpened. "You're someone who should understand basic respect." Harry shot up from the sofa, towering over Graham. The tension in the room ignited instantly. Security instinctively moved a step closer off camera. Crew members shifted nervously. Audience members leaned back in their seats like people watching lightning strike too close. "You want to lecture me about respect?" Harry shouted. "Your staff treated me like any ordinary person. No greeting, no deference, no recognition of my status." Graham stood too, but he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Your status doesn't give you permission to disrespect my staff." My guests or my audience? Disrespect. Harry laughed in disbelief. I've only explained my expectations. If your ego can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't host. Gasps rippled across the room. Graham's face flushed, but his voice remained steady. My ego isn't the issue, he said. Your entitlement is. Harry took a threatening step closer. Do you have any idea what my family has done for this country? Graham's Irish accent thickened with emotion. I know exactly what your family represents. And right now, you're disrespecting all of it. The room felt electric. Every pair of eyes in that studio darted between the two men. You're nothing but a talk show host, Harry snapped. I'm royalty. And this, Graham responded quietly, is my show. Harry. But Graham didn't. Harry, he said firmly. You are no longer welcome here. A collective gasp, followed by absolute stillness. Because no one in modern TV history had ever kicked a royal off live television. For a moment, Harry didn't move. The words seemed to hang in the air, echoing across every corner of the studio. You are no longer welcome here. It was as if the entire room had been placed on pause. Audience members stared wide-eyed, mouths slightly open. Sarah Matthews had frozen mid-breath, her hand hovering near her face. James Walsh sat upright, stunned, as if someone had splashed ice water on him. Even the camera operators hesitated, unsure whether to zoom in or cut away. Harry blinked slowly, as though he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Excuse me, he said, voice trembling with rage. You think you can throw me out? Graham didn't flinch. I'm not thinking, he replied calmly. I'm stating a fact. Your behavior tonight has crossed every line imaginable. The prince scoffed loudly, shaking his head. You're making the biggest mistake of your career. You have no idea what the consequences will be. Do you know who I am? Graham stepped forward just enough to close the gap, but not aggressively, simply, with the authority of someone who'd reached his limit. Yes, Harry, he said with steady conviction. I know who you are, but that doesn't excuse how you've treated the people in this studio. Harry looked around desperately, searching for support, but everywhere he turned, he found the same expression: shock, discomfort, disappointment. Sarah's eyes were full of disbelief. James looked away to avoid meeting his gaze. Not a single crew member stepped forward. Not one audience member clapped or protested. Silence was the only response. This is absurd, Harry snapped. I won't be humiliated like this. You humiliated yourself, Graham said quietly. All I asked for tonight was common courtesy. Harry opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, Graham lifted one hand and signaled toward the edge of the stage. Security. 2 guards, dressed plainly but unmistakably authoritative, approached with calm professionalism. They didn't grab Harry, didn't threaten him, just stopped a respectful distance away. Sir, one of them said politely, if you'll come with us. Harry stared at them, face flushed with anger, chest rising and falling sharply. Unbelievable, he muttered. This entire show is beneath me. Graham's reply was firm but not cruel. Then leaving shouldn't be difficult. The guards guided Harry toward the exit. He didn't fight, but every step he took carried the weight of fury and humiliation. He paused at the door and turned back. This isn't over, he hissed. Graham simply nodded once. It should never have started. The door closed behind Harry with a soft click that felt louder than any shout. For a heartbeat, the studio was utterly still. Then the audience erupted, an explosion of applause, cheers, and, well, he said with a shaky laugh, that was unexpected. And just like that, the legend of the night, Prince was kicked off. The Graham Norton Show was born, forever etched into television history. Graham decided to press on, hoping the interview would naturally settle into safer territory. He shifted the conversation toward Harry's new charitable foundation, something that should have sparked warmth, purpose, maybe even a moment of inspiration for the audience. For a brief second, it seemed to work. Harry straightened up and began describing his work with military veterans, his tone level and almost normal. But before Graham could follow up with a question, Harry paused mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he looked past the cameras. Actually, before we continue, he said sharply, could someone handle the audience member with the cough? It's distracting. The room froze. Graham blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. I'm sorry, who? The woman in the 3rd row, Harry said, gesturing irritably. She's been coughing since I sat down. It's extremely disruptive. A camera briefly captured the woman he was referring to. She looked mortified, covering her mouth with both hands. Though she'd only coughed once or twice, hardly unusual in a studio packed with hundreds of people. Under bright lights, Graham tried to give Harry an out. I think it's just normal audience behavior. Let's continue. Normal for your usual guests, Harry cut in coldly. But I expected more control considering my position. A hush swept across the studio. Sarah Matthews stared at Harry as if she'd just watched him flip a table. James Walsh leaned back slowly, lips pressed tight. Even the crew members shifted uncomfortably behind the cameras. Graham's smile slipped, just a fraction. The first crack. All right, he said gently. Let's move on. Your foundation. But Harry wasn't moving on. In fact, he continued, the applause when I walked in seemed a bit lackluster. Were they properly briefed? Do they understand the significance of tonight? The audience stared at him in disbelief. Graham inhaled sharply, the warmth draining from his expression. Our audience was briefed exactly as they always are, and I thought their welcome was lovely. Well, Harry said with a shrug, coming from American shows, where there's a proper understanding of protocol, this felt underwhelming. The air thickened like fog. You could practically hear people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah crossed her arms. James stopped smiling. Even the camera operator hesitated, unsure where to aim the lens. For the first time in his career, Graham Norton was visibly losing patience. His lips tightened. His shoulders stiffened. The famous playful sparkle in his eyes faded. Harry, he said quietly, how exactly should we have prepared differently for your appearance tonight? Harry leaned back, smirk forming, the kind of smirk that makes every person in. Well, Graham, your team should have researched proper royal protocol before booking someone of my caliber. This isn't a local morning show. The words landed like a slap. And this was the moment everything truly broke.